Now, getting back to Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a University of Illinois Extension commercial agriculture educator. Her programs include commercial fruit and vegetable production, and she also trains and supports Master Gardener volunteers in the Madison Monroe St. Clair unit. So, without further delay, take it away, Elizabeth.
Hey, thanks, Bill. Well, this is kind of an exciting program for me, particularly for people that are, looking to add natives to their landscape, or whether they're, trying to build a specific garden. It's kind of important to know when things bloom, which ones are really going to be eye-catching. And so over this past year under COVID-19, I started doing a kind of a weekly update, like Missouri Botanical and what's in bloom this week. And so I had this entire slide set of plants that went well beyond native plants as well. And so I was able to pull those together and pull out the natives. And I think I ended up with probably, I don't know, must have been 160 some plants in it that were native to the United States. And I'm thinking, gosh, I can't cover that many plants, so I need to knock it down. So when I knocked it down to, well, let's just look at some plants that are native to Illinois. And I still had too many plants. And so my final cut for today are plants that are native specific to one of the three collar counties east of the Mississippi for St. Louis. So it had to be Madison, Monroe, or St. Clair that these plants were native in at least one of the counties. And so the handout that you might have downloaded has quite a bit more in there. So it also has all of the Illinois natives as well. But what I am just showing today are going to be ones that are just native here locally. And so one of the comments I'm going to make is I'm going to say the vast majority of the plants I'm talking about today are straight native species, but there are a few that I'm showing you that I would call native vars. That means they're a cultivar of a native species. So I'm showing you one here. This is a wild blue phlox, blue moon. And so occasionally you're going to see some that actually, excuse me, have a cultivar name. So as we move through these, one of the first questions, I was going to put this at an end, and this is not in your slide set. So if you want to take a little bit of notes, where do you get natives, or where do I get natives? I always try to visit local native plant sales, and I have two that I'm aware of right now. So this is not, limited to just these two. But the Heartland Nature Conservancy is going to have an online plant sale. I believe it opens up on March 15th. I'm going to be speaking with Ned Siegel on, I believe, the 18th, talking about some of these plants, but they're going to be open for orders for a little over a month. Shaw Nature Center is actually having their plant sale this year, and it is also going to be virtual, the Shaw Wildflower Pickup. And their online ordering, I just looked at their website, is going to open on April 9th. There are also all of our local nurseries, a lot of them carry some natives in all of their selections, and some more than others. And a tip to you, there is a group called Grow Native that is, a membership marketing group. And so a lot of our nurseries are members of this, and they've developed some tags that say Grow Native so that, they catch your attention if you're looking for native plants. So look for pot tags that have the Grow Native logo on them. And that's one way just to shop at our local nurseries. And then there's also quite a few mail order nurseries that sell either potted plants, bare root plants, or seeds for you to grow. And I've listed just a few here. The closest one to us is probably Missouri Wildflower Nursery. It's over near Jefferson City in Missouri. There's also north of us, Prairie Moon Nursery and Prairie Nursery, and to the south of us, mail order natives. And as I say, this is just a quick way of giving you some options if you're looking. Now, my intent with this presentation, I'll go ahead and get started with our first plant. My intent with this presentation is that if you're looking to fill a space in your garden with some flowers, that if you look in the upper right-hand corner, these are all going to have the same layout. I have put the window of when bloom occurs. So for bloodroot, this one is March through April. And in parentheses is when bloom started at my home in the Glen Carbon area, so that you can kind of have a general idea of when you can expect bloom to start. I've also stated what their preference is in terms of sunlight. And the third line is their preference for soil moisture. And the last line will be what their height range usually is. And at the very bottom, I have given you what their native species range is. So I've already told you that all of these are native very specifically to our area right here. And so if I just start then talking about bloodroot, bloodroot is one of these small woodland plants that has just pure white flowers. I mean, they're almost hard to look at when the sun is shining on them. They're that reflective and white. So they're very showy, have very showy yellow stamens in the center, as you see. The leaves are somewhat of a light bluish green and are heavily lobed. They need shade and well-drained soil. So these guys don't like to have wet feet or constantly super moist clay type soil. And the interesting thing about them is their seeds have a nice little fatty substance or a lipid on them that ants like. And so they've developed a method for ants to move these around. So if you get a little patch, you'll probably see them start moving around and by the work of ants. You will find that if you break off any part of this plant, that they have copious yellow-red sap. And so that includes the root as well. And so that's where it gets its name bloodroot, because it almost looks like it bleeds red when you break something off. I will mention that there is a cultivar called multiplex. That's a double-flowered form. The next one that I just really like, this one is called squirrel corn. And it really does look like a piece of corn, or maybe, and I've mentioned the tiny tubers look like little yellow peas, but you can kind of see where they get their name. And in fact, some of our little animals like chipmunks and mice are pretty good about digging them up and moving them around. So you'll kind of see these move around from where you planted them as well. The foliage itself is usually around 6 to 8, 10 inches maybe. And these beautiful little heart-shaped flowers that you associate with all the bleeding hearts. These are usually either pure white or little pieces of pink, as you can see in these two different pictures, kind of daintily above the foliage. I kind of consider these somewhat ephemeral, meaning that once it starts drying up and getting hot, the foliage dies back. And so you want to make sure that you remember where these are at, because you can easily plant something over the top of it and mess it up. There are, if you do some shopping, you will find that there are some pure pink forms, or more pink than what I'm showing you here as well. And so they call them the pink form for that. So this one is, will do with dappled sunlight, medium shade. Average soil, again, doesn't like to be in really wet soil. I will mention that you probably have already guessed that we're going to be moving progressively through the season. So as you see right now, we're kind of in the late March window, moving into the early window. This is one of my favorite natives, and that's Celandine Poppy. This is another one that if you just get 1 or 2 plants, they will start moving around. So again, ants are responsible for moving these seeds around. So just get a few and they'll just start naturalizing very nicely throughout. These really like kind of a rich, consistently moist soil. They will stay green throughout the season if you have consistently moist soil, but if it gets dry and you don't supplement water, they'll kind of start burning up and looking a little bit ratty. So particularly if they've got a lot of sun on them. So I would say dappled sunlight at most, probably preferentially like shade, average to moist. And these get, you know, maybe maximum of 2 feet on them. So just a beautiful yellow color in the early spring. I've noticed, I've walked in my yard, they've already popped up, so they're starting to do their thing. This is another beautiful one. And, you know, one of the things I like about Virginia bluebells is when they're in bloom, they're this hot pink color that when they open up, they fade to this just beautiful sky purple blue. And with this backdrop of kind of bluish green leaves, it kind of looks chartreuse here, but that's kind of a feature of the picture I took. They're really more of a bluish green rather than chartreuse color. But these are another one that will just kind of move around and naturalize throughout your garden. So this is one that they look better, I'm going to say, in shade than they do in sun. So if you have them in sun, you're probably going to want to supplement water to keep them nice, but they are ephemeral. Once it starts getting dry, the foliage will die back. And so again, this is another one you have to keep in your mind where it's at, that you don't mess up and dig them up and plant something on top of them. So really kind of an easy plant to grow if you get it in the right light conditions. I love this tiny little plant. This is called ruin anemone, but it's really a thelocrum. And it is a tiny, tiny little plant. So without the flowers is probably maximum of 6 inches. With the flowers, maybe 9 inches. There are a number of cultivars, and I've shown you a couple of them, the Cameo and the Show of Stubble Pink, but the picture to the left is what the native straight species. It alone is just beautiful, but it's a small little dainty flower. It's something that you're going to want to have close to a sidewalk or a walkway where it's not overcrowded or taken over by larger plants. So it is a relatively small. I'm going to say that this really likes moist but well-drained soil. So it doesn't like to have wet feet. So you're going to want to look for part shade to shade, average soil, but it needs to be well-drained. And just keep in mind, I think the biggest thing with this, it's small. I kind of keep a cage over it because deer seem to like to munch on it too, which is rather annoying. So you might want to do a little bit of protection until it gets well established. But again, just a beautiful little wildflower. You know, when we talk about large flower bellwort, this always looks like it's a little bit droopy in appearance, and it's not because of, you know, drought conditions. That's just its natural characteristic to be like this. And so this is another one of our shade plants that prefers average towards a moist soil. So this is kind of a woodland garden plant. It is rather clump forming. This is the grandiflora, or the large bellflower. There are a couple of other types of bellflowers that you can that you might run across as well, and some of them are lighter colored flowers. But I like this one because this has the really deep, bright yellow flowers on it. And so everything on this plant is a little bit twisted or rolled as you look, and that's just its natural characteristic on it. It will, as you can see in the left-hand picture, start blooming fairly shortly after it comes up out of the ground, and then it just keeps expanding and getting bigger. So this is, it doesn't grow first, then flower. It's almost like it flowers first, then grows. So again, a beautiful early spring. So this is early April in my garden for blooming. This is probably one of my favorite plants. I say that a lot. You'll probably hear me say I love this plant. I should put little hearts on these, but there'd be little hearts on everything. I love this plant. This is like a little clump of leaves or a little cluster of leaves, and you can see these naked flower stalks going up, and just these little they look like lawn darts hanging there. And so this one is the white one. This also can be somewhat pink occasionally. So if you're expecting it to be white and it has a little bit of a pink or lavender cast, that's kind of a normal form as well. There are other species that are a lot deeper color of pink too, and those are usually, as I say, a different species. So for this particular one, these are also ephemeral. So anytime you hear the word ephemeral, that means that once the heat comes on for our area, the leaves will die back. And particularly when it starts getting dry, that speeds up the process along the way. So this one, I have them in full sun, as this one is here. I have them in fairly good shade. They still perform very well. So this is a really adaptable plant, at least for my experience. I have them in some soils that are probably a little bit on the drier side, like underneath of a pecan tree. Those have tendency to be, you know, a little bit dry area in my yard. And then I have them in average moisture as well. So these are well adapted, and these will spread around as well on you. So if you get a couple, you'll start seeing them pop up elsewhere. Golden seal is, the technical term would be an apetalous flower. The flowers don't actually have petals on them. And so what you're actually seeing are very prominent stamens on this plant. And so this is one that is lacking in petals. But the flowers come out before the leaves have fully expanded. So when it's in bloom, it has this really crinkled, succulent look, and it just looks like little white floss flowers to me. It's just really cute. As the season progresses and the leaves fully expand, those flowers will develop into a single, each flower is a single berry. It's usually, it is inedible scarlet red berries. So it's quite pretty in the fall when you're walking along and see these green leaves with this little berry just seems to be sitting right on the top of it. So this is, again, a part to full shade, average soil at, you know, the most, really likes a little bit moister soil for this particular plant. You know, there's probably no Trillium that I don't love, but this is one of our native ones. And if you have a good eye, you can kind of see them in natural areas quite regularly. Even when I walk in my neighborhood, I'll kind of see them off close to wooded areas where I'm located. So this is another clump forming plant, and it comes from underground rhizomes, and it will spread, and I'm going to say slowly. But if you start with one, you will eventually get more if it's left undisturbed and it likes where it's at. So it likes to have a rich, you know, organic, well-drained soil and part shade to full shade. So this is another shade plant. I will say this is one that, you know, when we hit a dry spot, you're going to want to supply water to this if the soil starts to dry out. So that's one thing that can really set this plant back is getting it where it gets dry. Trick is to have available watering when it's dry. So the plant features this naked stem that comes up out of the ground, and at the very top, or everything in this plant is in threes. And so it's topped with 3 mottled leaves, and so they're green and they're mottled with purple. The purple is not showing up quite as much in these pictures, but take my word for it, that is purple mottling on those leaves rather than dark green. Quite lovely. And the flowers, the petals come in 3, the sepals come in 3, and they sit right on the top, dead on the center. And so, again, a beautiful ephemeral wood lily, also known as bloody butcher. And so I think the terminal size on this, mine are usually around 1 foot, but I've seen some elsewhere that, you know, get up, you know, closer to 1.5 feet or so. You know, I just kind of love pawpaws. They're, you know, I debated on whether to even show this one because the flowers are really small. But when you see a tree just covered with these just like oxblood red little bell flowers, it's just lovely. And it is one of our native fruit producing trees. So pawpaw, Asimina. It can be grown as a multi-stem shrub or as a single leader small tree. To me, it kind of has a tropical look to it. The leaves are 6 to 12 inches long, and they just kind of have that tropical look. They are best naturalized near streams or along the edge of woodlands where they get some dappled shade. I will say one of the tricks with pawpaws is the young plants are kind of intolerant to direct sun. And when we grow them in actual cultivation, we provide temporary shade for them. But once they're established, they will take quite a bit of sun. And when we actually have orchards with pawpaws in them, they're in direct sun. But it's the young plants that really need to have some protection. This is a plant that's a host for a zebra swallowtail butterfly. So if you're interested in butterfly conservation, this is a nice plant to have as well. It does produce fruit. I have to say on my property, they are never left by wildlife for me to get any. And so usually the wildlife feeds on them well before they're even close to being ripe. And so you might get that in your head that if you plant this, it's not only for swallowtails, but also food for wildlife. This will spread slowly to form small colonies or thickets. So if you want more trees, you need to watch for them to be able to identify the leaves so that you don't cut them back like you would some other unwanted growth in your woodland area. I think everyone is familiar with dogwoods, but in fact, the white flowering dogwood, Hornus florida, you would kind of maybe guess it wasn't since it has Florida in the name, but it actually is much of eastern North America, including Illinois and including our area in the collar counties. This is a small tree that's branching is fairly horizontal. The flowers come on before the leaves, and they start out kind of a creamy color. And I shouldn't call them flower petals because these are actually bracts, the big white bracts. The flower is in the center that you see there, but the bracts start out as creamy color and fade to a very beautiful white when fully expanded. And so it's just beautiful to come across a dogwood when it's in full bloom with the white black bracts fully expanded. I will also say that this plant, to me, has excellent fall color. It's a nice deep red color. These plants, unlike the pawpaw tree, these guys like a well-drained, high organic matter, uniformly moist. They really do not tolerate poorly drained soil. So you're going to want to site this one in sun to part shade. I mean, it's naturally an understory tree. I'm going to say that these are anywhere between 15 and 30 feet as their terminal height. Beautiful plant. With red Columbine, Aquilegia, this is a much bigger one than a lot of the cultivated Columbines that you want to buy. So this one's 2 to 3 foot tall. Mine are spreading around, and I've noticed that they tend to stay to the shade. So I'm going to say, you know, the books say sun, but given its choice of where it's successful on my property, it has a tendency to be more part shade. And so if you look at the flowers, you can see they're this beautiful red and interior yellow that is somewhat of a nodding nature. And we're into kind of a later April bloom date at this point. Grows well in well-drained soil and dapple shade. And as I've already mentioned, it's often self-sows. So if you plant one, you're gonna get some more. One of the things that I wanted to include were some that are trickier too. And so when we're talking about lady slippers, I don't consider these plants that a beginner should just jump right into. These are relatively expensive plants. And so if you mess up, it could be fairly costly. These are kind of like blueberries in that they're very specific in what their root environment needs to be. And so they like uniformly moist and just absolute sharp drainage. They also like morning sun, or I should say for where we're at because of how warm it is. They cannot take our afternoon sun. And so I'm going to say for our area, they really need to be morning sun only, and afternoon it needs to be a fairly good shade so that they're not getting that. So on my property, I really don't have those kinds of conditions to be able to grow these. And so I grow these in pot culture. That means that I take a pot, and I actually use a 2-gallon pot, and I put a media that I make, and I've given the recipe here. This is not on your slide, so if you want to note it, go ahead. 2 parts granite grit, 6-part perlite, 2-part potting soil, and a handful of ground oyster shell. And so I get the granite grit and the oyster shell from someplace like a farm supply that supplies for chickens. Both of those products are used, in chicken production, egg production, whatever. And so I mix that up and fill my pot, and then I dig a hole and I sink the pot. And I've been very successful for a number of years, and my orchids are increasing in number doing this. But I did want to show you some that are a little bit tricky. Now, one thing that I want to really emphasize is that all of the cypripediums or the lady slippers are all federally protected, meaning that they are not to be collected from the wild. So when you order these, you're ordering from a nursery that is licensed to be able to propagate that. And that's usually in tissue culture. So, be highly suspicious and don't be involved with digging up these plants from the wild, because as I say, they're fairly sensitive to their environment and changes in their environment. So if you want to try these, stick with a nursery that actually is licensed to be able to sell these. I buy mine if you're interested. There are more than this, but the one, that particular plant I got from Plant Delight Nursery, and I know that they're sold out for this year, but I will mention that's where I got it. So moving on, we're still in late April, Geranium Immaculatum. This is a nice perennial to just plant because it kind of threads through other plants there. So it's clump forming, woodland perennial, deeply cut leaves. It really likes sun to part shade. I'm going to say probably more favorable to a little bit of shade, particularly in the afternoon in our hot climate. It prefers a moist, organic soil, but I'm going to say that it's tolerant of more normal garden soil, and it will spread under optimal conditions. So this is one that if it starts getting dry, I know that I need to supplement this one with water. But this is a nice little flower that's foliage just blends in with lots of other plants. It's a good mixer. I love this plant too. This would have a little heart on it. This is giant Solomon Sill. But one of the problems with this on my property is it never attains its full height. As you can see, the minimum height is 36 inches. It can go up to 7 feet, but deer will every year come and nip this one off. So these plants you're looking at here have all been nipped off. So it doesn't stop them from, still producing these little beautiful little dangly fruit, and later those will be fertilized and produce little dangly blue fruit. It's quite lovely woodland plant, but it is attractive to deer, and they almost always come in and nip it off. So this is a rhizomatous plant that compared to other Solomon Sills, this one's a relatively slow spreader, but it will spread on there. So keep that in mind on where you put it. And if you don't have deer pressure, it can get some fairly significant height. So this is, again, a part shade, full shade, average to moist, if not only wet soil. So, and I'm going to say that it spreads a little more readily in wet than it does dry. So make room. This plant, Great Indian Plantain, is a large, substantial plant. That's my husband standing by it. He's about 6'2", and you can see that this plant just way overtops him. And so this is rarely sold in nurseries. I grew this one from seed to get this. I just think that it's a really interesting statement type of plant that you're going to want to put it to the back of a border. It is a full sun plant. It will take some part shade. And so where I have it sited is sun most of the day, but by late afternoon, it gets part shade. So you can see it's every bit Smallest 3 feet, rarely would it be 3 feet. It's probably closer to that 7 to 9 foot for this particular plant. Just a beautiful, beautiful plant. You know, if you need, I'm gonna say a milkweed, here's one for shade. And so we have a lot of milkweeds that are great in full sun, but here's one that is great for partial to full shade. So this is poke milkweed. And if you look at the right-hand picture, you can see a bumblebee on it. And so this is, even in shade, this is found by pollinators, and it is also a larval or a host plant for monarch butterfly as well. And so look for this poke milkweed for your woodland plant. So it likes average, medium to dry, or I should say medium dry, not, you know, like sand prairie dry, like dry, but just kind of a little bit on the dry side. Does very well. So, you know, when I walk by, these little droopy hanging flowers always catch my attention, and there are always pollinators on it. So it's kind of like a magnet, just like all of its other little cousins in the milkweed family. You know, I think Ohio horse mint is just a beautiful, beautiful plant. I would say the only drawback that I have with this plant is it's in the mint family, and it is one that spreads a lot. One of the nice things about it is it's very easy to edit the plants out. So if you just, you know, hoe them off, that usually does it. So it's a pretty, you know, a pretty good seed producer, but easy to clean up and knock the numbers back. It is an absolute pollinator magnet. I'm surprised that I don't have a picture here with a bee or something on it, because when you walk by, it's just moving with all the little pollinators on it. So my comments on this is it does well in sun to medium shade. Mine tend to reproduce in more of the shady areas. So I would say that for our climate, it's more of a filtered shade type of plant. It prefers to be more on the dry side to average, does not like to have wet feet, and it's probably about 2 foot tall plant. But again, a beautiful, different type of structure, you know, or texture in your garden. You know, I had a friend, many of you maybe knew Nancy Khrushchev, who passed away this past year, and this was her favorite flower from Naturescapes. Is probably one of my favorite flowers too. If I wax poetic on this, I'm gonna say that this is, it's almost like these flowers are floating in the air. Because they're on these leafless stems, and the flowers are on the top, and when the wind blows, they just move so gently and beautifully. It's just a nice, delicate little plant. I shouldn't say little, it's 26 to 36 inches, but it just has a delicate nature compared to some of the other cone flowers. This one likes full sun, will tolerate maybe some light shade, but it's really a sun plant. It likes sharp drainage. It does not like to have wet feet, so look for sharp drainage on this one. We are into June. This is Indian Psychic, Geranium. It is a rhizomatous plant, and it probably gets between 2 and 3 foot tall, sun to shade. And I notice in our temperatures, again, when mine reproduces or moves, it has a tendency to stay more in the afternoon shade areas and more in the dry to average. So again, another plant that doesn't like wet feet on it. So this is, I think what's interesting about this plant is not only these star-shaped flowers, but the leaves have an interesting, different look than any other leaves that you're going to see. So again, another plant that appreciates a little bit of shade in the heart of day when you're walking by, and I have it under a lot of trees. So when you're walking by, you see these beautiful white flowers. You know, I think foxglove beer tongue must be the most adaptable plant. It's pretty much popped around all over the place in my yard and fills up blank spaces very nicely. Most of the leaves are held fairly close to the ground, almost like a rosette. but the flower stalk is very tall. That's what gives it its height, that 30 to 48 inches. It's not the basal plant, it's the leaf stalk. So this can be a sun to light shade, average to moist, and it will spread around in your garden. This is very much a pollinator magnet. And so that includes the long-tongued bees and the hummingbirds as well. Once it blooms, it gets little seed pods that are a pretty dark red that are attractive in themselves, in and of themselves as well. And so I'm showing you, there are some cultivated varieties here. I'm showing you a Husker Red or Husker. I don't remember how it's, or I don't know exactly which one it is, but it's a much redder stemmed plant than the straight species that I'm showing you in the other pictures. I just like this plant. This is a prairie beer tongue, or sometimes called a tubed beer tongue. I'm going to say that this one prefers a dry to medium soil with good drainage and a sunny location. So it's similar to the previous plant I just showed you, except for the flowers are more tighter packed, I guess is a good way to say it. So they're arranged in tight little tiers around these strong central stems, and it makes it, because of its nice structure, makes it a really nice fresh cut flower. I think this is just, it's one of, you think about plants when you're walking by and some just grab your attention. This is definitely one of them. So black cohosh, this is definitely light shade to full shade plant, and this is a statement plant. It is a big plant, but it features these really graceful stems that hold what I'm going to call spires of tiny little white flowers. And these plants are always covered with pollinators when I walk by them too. So these stems are held over a mound of leaves that kind of remind me of, they're a little bit ferny looking, or maybe like a stilby somewhat, but a pretty good plant. And this will spread around in your yard as well, not at a crazy rate, but you'll notice, more plants than you originally planted over time. So again, there are lots of cultivars of this plant, some of them that give it more of a purple color, or, stems are purple or moving towards black. So there's lots of cultivars of this, but this one is what the straight species looks like. Here's a plant that, we all think about, being a plant to plant for the monarch butterfly larva. For me, I find the plant to be a bit fussy. And that is because it does not do well with wet feet. It really needs to have average soil. And it can be slow to establish because it's naturally a tap-rooted plant. So I'm going to just warn you ahead. I usually tell people on fussy plants to buy more than one, to increase their chance of getting it established. I probably, I don't know, probably can get 2 established for every 5 that I buy or so. So you really want to keep trying until you get this established, because this is just really a magnet for pollinators, but it's also a larval host plant for the monarch butterfly to add to your garden. But, in terms of garden design, there are a few plants that are this screaming orange color too. And so that's one of the things that's nice about that. So I just show you this Slender Mountain Mint. This is just an absolute pollinator magnet. It just is. I'll just leave it that. And I'm showing you this one because of the mountain mints, this is probably the most polite in terms of not spreading around. It does a little bit better job of staying in its clump, its original clump, and not spreading around as much as some of the other ones. So just a profusion of pollinators for this one. Culver's root is another tall, when you want to get height in your garden. I'm listing Veronicastrum or Culver's root. Again, there are a number of cultivars that kind of move it more into a lavender or pink, but the straight species has a tendency to be more of a white. color, and it has that traditional candelabra, you know, like spires of white blooms on the plant. And so this one will grow in morning sun or partial shade. It really doesn't appreciate a lot of our hot afternoon sun. So if you can give it a little protection, I think it'll do a little bit better. So it likes average to moist, will tolerate some periods of dry, but in general, it likes average to moist. And if I didn't say it, it will spread a little bit. So you'll get more plants. I think everyone knows a coneflower. I'm going to just leave it at the straight species itself is quite beautiful, quite easy to grow, very adaptable to a number of growing conditions. The flowers themselves are attractive to pollinators throughout, and also the seeds, if you leave the seeds head, very attractive to birds like goldfinches. So it's not uncommon in the fall to see a goldfinch sitting on one of these plants feeding on the seeds that are remaining. Sweet scented Joe Pye weed. Gosh, there are a lot of Joe Pye weeds that range more in this kind of slightly pink color to some that are really deep, you know, almost a pink purple color. And this is another statement plant. These can get some serious height on them, 4 feet and up. You want to think of it as a focal point or something to the back of the garden. On this one, I'm going to say average towards moist is their preference. Will tolerate a little bit of dry, but that's not what they like. This one, I'm going to say I grew this from seed because you just don't see this one very often at all. In fact, I would actually say that it's a little bit short-lived. You know, when you think about cardinal flower, which is also a lobelia, it's also short-lived, and they have kind of similar likes. And so full sun plant, light shade, you need more shade if you don't have the moisture to go with it. And so it's kind of one of those inverse. If you're in full sun, you need to have some moisture. If you're in light shade, it needs to be a little bit on the drier side on this. So if you try this plant, don't expect it to be one of your long-lived ones. It's very much like cardinal flower. So this is kind of like the white version of the red cardinal flower. But again, quite lovely when you do have it. Garden phlox, gosh, there are endless cultivars from our native Phlox paniculata. Garden phlox. This is a full sun to part shade. I'm going to say that it is much more successful in moist soil than it is in dry. You want to make sure that you have good airflow because this plant is very susceptible to powdery mildew. I think that's probably one of the big drawbacks on this is it can get really burnt up looking. Missouri coneflower, I think this is the only yellow coneflower that I put in because there are lots of, well, I think I have a couple more in here, but this is one of my favorite smaller ones. This is probably more suited to the garden because of its small size. It's a full sun plant, dry to average, 20 to 30 inches. So it's not one of these big monster yellow sunflowers. So if you want a smaller one, this is a good choice. A lot of people don't like hairy petunia because it can be somewhat aggressive, particularly if you have it in its, you know, best conditions. And that's, you know, in terms of sun to average soil conditions, it can spread a little bit more than you want. It is a smaller plant, so you want to make sure that you get it closer to the front of the border and use it as such because larger plants can quickly overrun it. And so again, this has really reminiscent of our garden petunias, but this is a perennial, so it's a nice plant to add if you have like that look. There are a number of skull caps. I particularly like this one because it has this just beautiful inflorescence on it. It's just my favorite. This one is the Downy Skull Cap. It's around 2 to 3 foot tall. Sun will take a little bit of shade, medium shade maybe, average to moist. So it's not one that's going to really like dry soil, but this is just a beautiful skull cap. If you have some, you don't have this one, this is probably one that you're going to want to add. If you have a rain garden, I'm going to say blue mist flower is a good one. This is one that will like up to wet conditions as well. In fact, it can be kind of aggressive if it's in full sun with sufficient number of water. I didn't have a plant that has it in full bloom, but if you just imagine this plant just totally covered with these little floss flowers, it's quite lovely. Swamp mallow is, I include this one because it's a large plant. Usually you think of it in wet environments, again, maybe a rain garden in here, but it actually does fairly well in just our average garden soils as well. And so it can have dinner plate size blooms on it. And as you see here, I don't have it in a rain garden. I have it set aside, you know, in a regular garden.
10 minutes.
Liatris. This is probably my favorite Liatris because it's one of the taller ones. I will say if you grow this one, you're probably gonna have to stake it the first year. Lots of butterflies, is just a butterfly magnet. So if you like to photograph butterflies, this is a good plant to have. Any of the Liatris would be. Obedient plant is a nice, again, got this, you know, a smaller size. So if you want something white in a smaller size, this is nice. It takes full sun, average soil, nice good sized garden plant and native to our area. Now I said I like the Missouri coneflower because it's a smaller one. Here's the one I picked that's a big one. Compass plant is anywhere up to 8 feet tall, highly cut leaves. It really needs a lot of space. So this is a big plant if you have space for it. Quarry vervain, I'm going to just say if you try this one, you need absolutely sharp drainage. It does not like wet feet. You're going to have more success with this in a drier site. Swamp milkweed, again, including, you know, if you're really looking for a pollinator garden, this is a nice one for wetter sites. And so I've shown you a couple of milkweeds for other sites. This is one that's for a wetter site, and it has a beautiful pink color. Blue lobelia is probably a little tougher than the other lobelias that I've mentioned, the red and the white. This blue one is a self-seeder, and so it's short-lived too, like the other ones I mentioned, but it self-seeds more readily. So the plant it continues. I consider this to be somewhat of a short-lived plant just because of our heat. It really is a full sun plant that likes more wet soil. And if the soil dries out, this plant just doesn't survive. But it actually is a quite beautiful plant. And there are a number of cultivars. This is a cultivar I'm showing you. The straight species is a nice lemon yellow. Here's a fall onion. I don't think I'm going to talk further than that, just to tell you that there's a fall blooming onion. It's called fall glade onion or wild onion. Bottle gentian. I love this little plant. These little bottles never open up. In fact, a bumblebee will force itself in to pollinate it. So this is a plant that likes sun to part shade, but it really likes moisture. So I have this plant near my gutter outlet where water is flowing, and it seems to do very well in those areas. So this is a lot of gentians like dry. This is not one of them. This likes to have uniform moisture. And I think the last one I'm showing you, we just have to have a goldenrod in here. The one that I picked is rough goldenrod. This one is fireworks. And it is a full sun plant, average to wet soil, but again, it provides a nice color in the fall when the leaves are starting. And so we've made it up to September 20th. So I kind of ran you through quickly a whole season of color. See if we've got a few minutes to answer a few questions before we hop off. So Kay, did we get any questions that I can answer? If we don't have time, I will get back with you. Kay, unmute yourself. I can't hear you. You're still not unmuted, Kay.
I thought. Okay, can you hear now? I'm
yes,
sorry.
I can. You're fine.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. As always, it was a terrific presentation. I won't read all the wonderful places just because you're doing the next presentation.
Okay.
So I know you need to skedaddle. But there were a couple of questions, and let's scroll down through. But you know, it's just amazing how many wonderful places we have in Illinois to go and look for wildflowers.
Oh yes, most definitely.
And there were some plant IDs. You know, I think iNaturalist. Do you have a favorite, Elizabeth?
Well,
or
you know,
Jennifer?
I'm pretty good at plant ID myself, but even I was commenting earlier that I am impressed with iNaturalist, you know, on how it can at least get you probably in the ballpark to then figure out the final details on it. I think that's a pretty good one to add. For those not familiar with it, it's just an app you can put on your phone. You take a picture of the plant and ask iNaturalist to tell you what it is.
Right. And the title of the program is Native Plants Through the Seasons. So someone missed that. And the book is called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmerer. And I mentioned that earlier because it does deal with natives. A lady moved in, her name is Imgat, or I'm hoping I pronounced that right. And she's moved in from the West, and she wants to know if there are some soil accelerators and what to plant for pollinators. I think you took care of the pollinator part, but do you have a soil accelerator?
I don't know what she means by that.
I wonder if she just means soil conditioner for these natives. Do they really need it?
Well, yeah, she might have to, she's welcome to follow up with me on that because I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. And did we give your email or your contact?
Yeah, it's just my last name, Wahle at illinois.edu. So everyone can see my last name on the screen. So it's Wahle at illinois.edu.
Okay. And someone's doing a raised bed at their library, Kathy is, and it says, what are good perennials for this?
Well, again, it depends on what is in the raised bed. I mean, if it's well drained, full sun, shade, raised beds are really no different than any other. I will say one consideration, because I have raised beds and I've got flowers in them, is depending on the depth of the bed, you might have to water them more than you would an in-ground bed. And so that's probably one of them. But
and I'm hoping you have time for the last couple of questions. Someone said hairy petunia. Well, I think it's Cynthia. Said hairy wild petunia will spread everywhere. It took years to get it out of my garden. Do you want to comment on that?
I have had a number of people tell me that. And again, you know, there's a lot of plants that I've had that have just been a nightmare for me because evidently I have the perfect conditions for them. And I'm going to say that hairy petunia probably falls in that category as well. Where I have it is probably not one of its more favorite conditions, so it kind of slows it down. If you get it in where it's going to run, I'm going to make a general comment to people is if you see it starting to run right away, my theory on that is to eliminate it from the garden. I've had some plants that I just can't have because, you know, in a natural setting, maybe it would work, but not in a garden setting. And so, you know, sometimes we just have to take our loss and eliminate something that is just not working. And that petunia, you know, I've had other people tell me that it just does not work for them. For me, it is. It's a perfectly behaved plant.
Okay, and what about cutting back marshmallow? Is there a time to do that, or do you when do you cut it?
Well, you know, there's a number of plants, and I'm going to just be in general here. There's a number of plants that you can kind of pinch when they're young, and then there are others. And marshmallow is one of those that if you want to pinch it when it's young to get more branches and have it height reduce, you can do it when it's young before it has the flower set.
Oh, okay. Now, and I'm sorry, there's also one about how finding out many of my plants are native. Okay, let's see. I'm sorry. There's one I thought about Liatris. Do you cut that back too?
I've never cut my Liatris back. I will say though that I stake all new plants the first year. I don't even give them a chance to flop on me. That's just one that I
Okay.
them back.
Okay. That's the Blazing Star, is it not?
Yes, all the blazing stars. Some of them are naturally short and you don't have to do that, but the bigger ones, you're probably gonna have to stake them the first year.
Okay. Well, those are all of our questions, but of course, if the questions come to mind, Elizabeth is always such a good resource, and she's happy to have those. And so I'll excuse you, Elizabeth, while I
All
go
right.
ahead and give the final comment.